Okay, buckle up. Thanks for coming and joining us on this. This is going to be kind of a wild ride for some of you and might be a little confusing, but what I want to do is show you how to find the quadratic formula on your own. In other words, this isn't something that somebody just kind of like popped out of thin air and said, oh, look, this works. This is something that you can find by doing some algebraic manipulation. So I am going to show you how to do this, and hopefully you'll remember this and go, oh, I remember that one teacher I had who showed me how to find this. So let's look at our basic standard equation of a quadratic, all right? So what we know is that when we are solving for roots, the very first thing we got to understand is that our y becomes 0, right? Because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the point where it crosses the graph, and at that point your altitude is 0, your y, your vertical, is 0. So you wind up with this, with y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, so we haven't done anything weird yet, and then I'm gonna finish this, and I'm going to say ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, moving that 0 to the other side. So done something pretty simple so far, nothing hard. Now, what I know, one of the ways I know how to solve a quadratic when I can't factor it, and that's kind of the assumption here, is that you use this formula when you can't factor it, is I know how to complete the square. And we talked about completing the square. And you learned how to complete the square. So let's do that. Let's complete the square. Now, keep in mind all the different things we do when we're completing the square. So the very first thing I always like to do when I complete the square is I like to move this number here and get it over to the other side. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to subtract c from both sides, okay? And then that's going to leave us with ax squared plus bx, and I'm going to leave this open for right now, and that's going to give me minus c. All right, so I have 0 minus c, which is just negative c. So that's where we're at so far. Next thing, in order to complete the square, I need to know that beyond a shadow of a doubt that this has to equal 1, right? That has to be 1. Okay, and the only way I don't know what it is, so the only way I can be sure that that is 1 is by dividing the entire equation by a to make sure that whatever this is, if I divide it by it now, that coefficient in front of the x squared can only be 1. Okay, so I'm going to divide this whole thing by a. I'm going to divide this by a. All right, and then what that gives me, okay, is ax squared divided by a just gives me x squared. And then this will give me plus b over a x equals, and I'm going to just leave this in black now, negative c over a. All right? So we're on our way. The next thing we know is when we are trying to complete the square, you take the term that's in front of the b, you divide it by 2, which is the same as multiplying it by 1/2, and then you square it. So we're going to do that off to the side here. We're going to take this b over a term, we're going to go over here, all right? And we're going to multiply it by 1/2, all right, which is the same as dividing it by 2, all right? And then that's going to give me b over 2a. And then we are going to square it, all right? So we're going to take that and we're going to square it. So you apply this to everything inside the parentheses. So you get b squared over 4, because that's what 2 squared is, a squared. All right, so my next part here is I have b squared plus b over a to the x, and then I will write this in a different color. We'll do it in green, is plus b squared over 4a squared, and then that equals our negative c over a, and then whatever we do to one side when we're completing the square, we got to do the same thing to the other side. So we got to add b squared 4a squared to this side to keep it balanced. All right? So the next thing I want you to think about, okay, is now we've got this really kind of messy looking thing going on, and bear with me because it doesn't stay that way. All right? The next thing I want to do is I want to see, hey, how can I clean this up? Can I clean this up somehow? And you know what? We can clean it up. And the way we can clean it up is we can find a common denominator between a and 4a squared and then get this thing over one thing. All right, so let's do that. And if I look at that, the common denominator of a and 4a squared is 4a squared. So all I got to do is I just kind of multiply something by this first term, add it to b squared, and then put it all over 4a squared. So if I do that, it becomes negative c times, well, it would be times 4a, right? Times 4a plus b squared, and then that goes over my 4a squared, all right? And if you wanted to factor it out, you could kind of see how we got back to where we started. So this gives me the term, and I'm going to rewrite this. Yeah, I know that this is going to be negative, so I'm going to put b squared first. So we're going to go b squared minus, and then I'm going to put my number first, and then put your letters in order. 4ac over 4a squared. All right, so that is the simplified version of what this is. All right, and so now we have determined we are going to write it like this. Okay, so let's, I wish there was a way I could copy this stuff. I don't know. Let's try and see if there is. But no, there isn't. All right, so let's see if we can take this and go down. Oh, yeah, that works perfect. All right, so on the next page here, we're going to start doing this. I'm going to rewrite this bit right here. I'm going to rewrite this as a difference of squares. Okay, or not a difference of squares, just as a square. So we're going to write it as x squared plus b over 2a, and then that squared, because that's what, remember how you do that, is you take this, and you take the square root of that, and that's what your term is right there, okay, from taking the square root. So b over 2a, all right, squared equals this whole mess, b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Well, now what we're going to do, all right, is we are going to, now I think I can raise this up now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take square root of both sides. All right, so if I take the square root of both sides of this, I get x squared plus b over 2a equals, and this is where we have plus and minus because we took the square root, b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Let's clean this up a little bit because I can take the square root of that bottom part. So that gives you just the radical sign on top of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Because square root of 4 is 2, square root of a squared is a. All right, and that's equal to this. All right, now, or sorry, this should be x. I made all these mistakes, and nobody told me what I was doing here. Is that Mr. Simons? You're screwing it up. These should all be x, all right? So x plus b times 2a, right? X plus that. So now what I want to do is I want to get x by itself, and I'm going to get x by itself by subtracting b over 2a from both sides, all right? So I'm going to go minus b over 2a, put it over there. All right, when I do that, these cancel out, so you get x is equal to, and then I'm going to take this whole thing right here, and I'm going to move it in front. And I'm going to go minus b over 2a, and then it's plus and minus, because we still got to deal with that. b squared minus 4ac over 2a, and then hopefully you're seeing what I saw when I did this, and I did do this, is that this cleans up kind of nicely because there's a built-in common denominator here. So this whole thing is going to go over 2a, right? And then you get minus b plus and minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. And here, lo and behold, you have what we now know is the quadratic formula. And we have found it. And so hopefully you realize that if you need to, you too can find this. All right? Like I said, there's a lot of areas to go wrong and it can be kind of messy, but I would recommend trying this just on your own sometime, just because if nothing else, it will help you internalize the formula a little more and remember it. Otherwise, how are you going to remember this? I mean, I completely forgot this between the time I took algebra and started having to relearn it again so I could teach it. So I totally get it if you can't memorize this. That's why it's nice to be able to know that you can find it. All right? Thanks for sticking with me in this video. I hope this was helpful. And I apologize about all these messy things, but we caught the mistake and we're all good to go.